Hello DevOps people, happy Tuesday! It's Ruby Tuesday today on Full Stack Live. Welcome. I hope you are doing well. I am doing well. It's been a quiet Tuesday so far. Earlier I copied most of my files that I didn't have copied yet from my Mac. So I have them available on my new Windows workstation, from which I'm streaming now. I've switched from the Mac to a Windows laptop, and so far I'm surprised that I am pretty happy. Yeah, so I just see that my streaming information gives me mixed messages. Twitch itself seems to be okay with my bitrate, but my streaming software oftentimes drops into the red. If stream quality is bad, please let me know and I'll try and reduce my bandwidth demands. But if everything is okay on your side, I'm more than happy to continue as it is. So don't be shy and let me know if stream quality leaves anything to be desired. Okay, and on this topic, if you have anything that you'd like to share, if you have any other feedback, if there is any question that you'd like to ask, please do so. Pop into Twitch chat and let me know, and I'll be more than happy to chat. At least at the moment, I might have another section of the stream later where I'm doing quiet work on the side and without sharing my desktop. That's always possible. I'm not sure if it's going to happen today, but if it is, that'll be a time where I have my mic switched off. Other than that, I think we're good to go. So let me try and switch my desktop setup. Come to think of it, I think we're okay. Let's make this full screen. No, just half screen here. All right, I'll move this over here. Oh, let's move it up here. Okay. So here. It's better. So let's get to our first topic. Hey folks, Fudersnabel, welcome. CreatureNex, happy to have you here. I hope you're doing well. How has the week been treating you so far? Where are my stream notes? Here. And why don't they appear? Hello, here we go. So, there's something that I'd like to talk about that someone on my Discord server brought up. And if you're not yet a member of my Discord server, we'll be more than happy to welcome you there. Here's the link. And so we were talking about career ladders, basically the career development that a software engineer can have. And of course, the way how you can make progress in inside an organization will differ from organization to organization. I've worked in big corporations with thousands of employees, and for the last 10 years I've been running my own small business with only a handful of people. But I think having something like a career ladder, a development program that tells you from the get-go how you can advance in your career is something that's quite important. I still remember applying for jobs after finishing my studies and not having any idea of how my career will develop after a while. Of course, we always talked about the stuff that I was supposed to do and the salary I was supposed to earn, but back then nobody gave you any indication. Sorry, my nose is itching. Nobody gave you any indication how you're going to progress after a few years and how your salary would develop and things like that. So the link that our colleague here sent me is from a web company, and it's a nice Google sheet that has a lot of details, what's expected of people on different levels of their career. And what I like the most is down here. I'm not sure if you can even see it, if it's even on screen. Let me see if I can. Come on. Pull this up a little bit. As you can see here, there are different tracks for individual contributors and for managers. And that's the first thing that caught my eye, because that's an important thing. Far too many jobs I experienced ended up with, well, if you want to advance in your career, if you want to make more money, you need to become a manager. And that's stupid. That's outright idiotic, forcing people into a completely different area of expertise, into a completely different job, basically. There's a huge difference between programming computers and leading people. And I hope everyone is aware of this difference. And Fudersnabel is perfectly right. Many good developers became bad managers because of this. Because you can't simply assume that just because someone is really good at their core job, which is, in this case, software engineering, they will be good in leading people, in organizing a team, in resolving personal issues, and all these things. And so that's the first thing that I'd like to highlight here. Having different tracks for what's called individual contributors, people who don't lead, at least not in a formal sense, and people who are managers. Okay, once this is covered, I think it's really good to have this kind of matrix that tells you the different career levels and the main criteria that you need to meet to advance to this level. And some of these are more trivial, some of these are pretty important. So let's take a look at them. Here we have 4 different columns here: technical skill, getting stuff done, impact, and the 4th column is communication and leadership. So there is still a leadership component in the individual contributor track, but that's simply on the technical level. Of course, you can take leadership, you can be a leader in your area of expertise without having to manage. So here in the technical skill level for the Engineer 1, which is more or less the first junior level, broad knowledge of core computer science concepts, focus on growing as an engineer, learning existing tools, resources, and processes. So that's entry level. You are supposed to have a basic grasp about your job or of your basic job, but it's very well expected of you to focus on growing, focus on acquiring knowledge. Creature Next writes, come from a biopharma background, and that was the case for me, which made me consider leaving the field to study programming full-time. I'm studying to become a full-stack developer. Yeah, so if the IC track is what you're interested in, if you want to simply become better in your engineering job, then you need a company that offers you advancement in the IC track. Without saying, yay, well, you can start as a junior engineer, then you'll advance to senior engineer, and then basically you're in a dead end because the only way up will be switching to management. Which is really similar to telling people, well, okay, you can be a junior baker, and then you can be a senior baker, and in order to advance, you need to become a shoemaker. It really boggles my mind. Oh, hey, Julian. Hello, welcome back. Long time no see. See, and that's why I told myself, let's try an afternoon slot for my stream again. Recently, I restarted my stream, but I mostly did it in the morning, starting at 11 my time to 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And I noticed that a lot of my regulars were missing. So seeing Oh Hey Julian again confirms that it might have been a good idea to go back to the afternoon. And I have my coffee here to keep me alert, even though there have been quite a few hours in the day already. So let's take another look at the Get Stuff Done column here. Develops their productivity skills. Again, it's about growth by learning source control, editors, build system, and other tools, as well as testing best practices. So basically getting familiar with your development and deployment tools, with the deployment tool chain. Capable of taking well-defined subtasks and completing these tasks. So someone else basically prepares your tasks for you, defines them, tells you what the outcome is supposed to be, and then they'll let you take a stab at that. That makes perfect sense. In the impact column, we only have developing knowledge of a single component of our architecture, which means start specializing in something that will be of value, but there is no expectation that you are already providing a return on investment, so to speak. And in the communication and leadership column, we have effective in communicating status to the team. That's the most basic communication that is necessary in a team. I just recently gave my talk about the direct method that I created for my own team at the Digital by Default Summit. And direct is an acronym for the things that you need to communicate to your team. They are about decisions, insight, results, and that's exactly what's meant here with communicating status. E stands for emotion, C is for contacts, and T has a double meaning of troubles or thanks. And in this case, it's about communicating status, so letting people know if the results that you were tasked with here in the Get Stuff Done column, if you have achieved them or not, and maybe talking of trouble if you have some kinds of difficulties delivering these results. Exhibits RTR's core values, that's a company, focuses on understanding and living these values, and accepts feedback graciously and learns from everything they do. That's the management part coming in here, where you can only grow, and especially grow in the right direction in terms of what the company expects of you, if you accept feedback, if you learn from mistakes, learn from misunderstandings and things like that. Then we have the engineer 2, writes correct and clean code with guidance, consistently follows stated best practices, participates in technical design of features with guidance. Again, there is this with guidance, so you don't have to be completely self-sufficient at this level. There is still dependence on colleagues on your team, where you get guidance, so you don't have to go the whole way alone. You become into an interesting part that raises the bar in terms of growth, because it says rarely makes the same mistake twice. Begins to focus on attaining expertise in one or more areas, for example, Java, JavaScript, Ruby, iOS development, performance best practices, efficient use of data stores, messaging, basically all the technology that the company employs. And then it says learns quickly and makes steady progress without the need for constant significant feedback from more senior engineers. So you need to become a little bit more self-guided and less dependent on constant feedback. Udas Nabel wrote, this is actually something I ask on interviews for larger companies. Do you have separate career tracks for engineers and managers? If no, then I'm significantly less interested. You should be. You should be. I mean, if your plan is to only be there for a while, advance in your job, maybe get promoted once or something like that, and if then you'll end up in a dead end because of the management issue, to leave, that's perfectly okay, I guess, and the company will have to deal with that because it's their fault, basically, if people leave after a relatively short time. Yeah, makes sense. But if you want to really bond with the company you're working for, maybe it's one of those rare unicorns where they do interesting things and have nice people and a good salary. You might actually want to have an IC track that gets you ahead quite a bit. It's not just my own career path, it also tells me a bit about what kind of managers I might run into. Oh yes, that's definitely a red flag, because you might actually run into the Brents of managers. With Brent, I'm referring to the book The Phoenix Project, where we have a very overworked but very capable, or I should put it the other way around, a very capable but overworked person working in IT, becoming the bottleneck for everything. And in a company that would promote well-working people, this brand would probably become a manager. And I find it hard to imagine that this would have a great outcome. Let's see, get stuff done for the engineer 2. Makes steady progress on tasks, knows when to ask for help in order to get themselves unblocked. See, that's a difference to the previous level. Now you need to notice yourself. If you're getting blocked by something, if you're getting stuck, and then have the confidence to ask for help, to ask for someone what to do in this case. And I guess that would probably also teach you to not become a Brent by accepting everything people throw at you and then getting completely mired. Instead, delivering status information and telling people when you are blocked. When people ask me if I prefer to be a good boss or a great comedian, my answer is always the same. To me, they are not mutually exclusive. I can agree here. Exegate.io, hello, good day to you. Or good morning, I guess. How are things? Okay, let's look at the impact on the on this still lower level of career ladder. Self-sufficient in at least one large area of the code base. Interesting. Requirements are raising the bar here. Multiple services in a pillar, all front-end code related to a main funnel flow with a high-level understanding of other components. So we are starting to specialize here. And in communication and leadership, it gives timely, helpful feedback to peers and managers. Mostly about yourself, I would say. Communicates assumptions and gets clarification on tasks up front to minimize the need for rework. Again, it's definitely connected to this part over here. Knowing when to ask for help and verifying your own assumptions before you end up somewhere you weren't supposed to go is an important part that engineers should learn early on. Surviving doesn't sound too amazing. I hope things are getting better for you soon. And I wish you a few silver linings at least. Then in the next row here on the Get Stuff Done column, we have able to own small to medium features from technical design through completion. Now we're getting somewhere where you really need to deliver. Capable of prioritizing tasks, avoids getting caught up in unimportant details and endless bike shedding. Yeah. Now it's about getting stuff done. Impact, capable of providing on-call support for their area, including systems that they are not familiar with. I speak from experience when I say doing on-call support requires a lot of confidence, can be nerve-wracking on end, and of course you also need to have the necessary tools to respond to emergencies in a proper way without making things worse. And so in this row here, I would say we are really getting into some serious requirements here. And I think it's right that we are on the verge of crossing into the senior engineer area here, because these are some serious requirements here. For the Snubble wrote, I think David Brent's shortcoming was that he wanted to be a great boss. Well, hopefully most bosses want to be great bosses, and a good friend, which is sometimes hard to do, hard to combine with being a great boss, but was also too full of himself. And yeah, that's always the downfall if you think you are better than other people just simply because you're a manager. That's not gonna work. Management means relationship building, and that's a high bar for personality traits. Exeged is bike shedding at the moment, which might contribute to the surviving aspect of your status at the moment. Sometimes it's fun to do bike shedding, and sometimes it's just tedious. Let's see, the final column here in terms of communication is solicits feedback from others. Now you're supposed to be actively asking for feedback and is eager to find ways to improve. Okay, so basically now you need to be a self-learner and not only gracefully accepting feedback, but also asking for feedback. Understands how their work fits into the larger project and identifies problems with requirements. Here we're getting into the strategy part of the business. You're not just a worker drone anymore. You need to understand where the business, where the team in particular is going, and how you can support the team in getting there. Okay, yeah. Now we are getting somewhere. Let's take a look at the Senior Engineer 1. Understands and makes well-reasoned design decisions and trade-offs in their area, able to work in other areas of the code base with guidance. So basically, you are at the stage where you have control over your own area and are confident and capable enough to also venture into other areas of the code base. This document is the career ladder of a web company. RTR is mentioned up here, and that's Rent the Runway. And they have a great reputation for their engineering organization. And someone on my Discord posted this link to this Google Doc where RTR basically describes what is expected of people on different levels of the engineering career ladder, both on the individual contributor track as well as the manager track. And I promised that in this stream I would comment on a few of these things. Since it's a well defined career ladder here, I think it's a great example to be discussing on stream, maybe with people who are at the moment applying for new jobs. But of course, you can also take this document as a inverse thing where you can, of course, also tell, well, would I fit into the Senior Engineer 1 level? Or are there things that I should focus on improving in order to actually meet these requirements? Okay, so this technical skill here is about competence, and doesn't flail while debugging is quite funny. Persistent in the face of roadblocks is mentioned here on the Get Stuff Done column. Dispatches them efficiently, pulling in others as necessary. Basically, you need to be able to teamwork and solve problems either yourself or cooperate in cooperation with others. Requires minimal direction oversight, so you need to be self-directed and find the way to the solution on your own terms, basically. Impact: end-to-end responsibility on projects of increasing complexity. I guess that's expected on the senior level. Contributes to common code. looks at test cases and advises QA on adjacent code or regression impact, understands the business supported by their pillar or the pillars they support. Yeah, that's basically mastery of the area you're working in. Teaching debugging is a personal failing point, needs improvement, see? And I can actually relate. I think debugging and the thought process behind it is something that's really hard to teach. Because basically you need to be able to separate experience, which can only be gained over time, that's what experience is, and technical skills that you can learn by reading documents and dealing with debugging tools and things like that. And I think for a newcomer it can be really daunting, especially if the person that tries to teach them is always mixing up their own experience, which is hard to attain for this person, for the other person, and tools. And there's a huge difference between knowing your debugger's commands and knowing where to apply them. Seniors also need to communicate a lot and more importantly effectively, and I guess that's reflected here. Communicates technical decisions through design documents, tech talks and the wiki. Mentors junior engineers via pairing, design review and code review. Contributes frequently to drinks and demos, which is probably a periodic meetup inside the company. There are a lot more levels here, and I guess I'm not going to read them out in full. But let's take a few peeks here. So Senior Engineer 2, go to expert in one area of the codebase. Getting stuff done. Scopes and stages work into well-defined milestones to avoid a monolithic deliverable. Basically to avoid big bang deployments, facilitating continuous deployment, something like that. Which also is reflected here, regularly delivers software on time and is constantly working to make accurate estimates and deliver on those estimates. Takes initiative to identify and solve important problems, not just everyday ones. Coordinating with others on cross-cutting technical issues. And communication makes others better through code reviews, thorough documentation, technical guidance and mentoring, or serving as a tech lead on a project. Cool. In the second row we have known for drama-free launches. I like that. Actually, I also never did estimation. Since I'm coming from the operation side of things, I never worked in an organization where I needed to develop software on a deadline or making estimations how long things would take. Not in an organized way, anyway. Okay, then let's take a look at the staff engineer above senior engineers. An SWAG. I'm not actually sure if I'm familiar with the. Let me see. It says strength and weaknesses, advantages, and not sure. I know SWOT. Strength, weaknesses, advantages and threats, I think. Scientific wildest guess. Okay, that's something a little bit different then. But it's scientific. I see my Pomodoro timer blinking in the corner of my screen. You can't because I switched to the wrong scene actually, but it's not that important. So I'm going to take a short break soon, but let's take a few more peeks in here. Staff engineers recognized as a prolific contributor to core and side projects, shapes broad architecture, ships multiple large services, complex libraries, or major pieces of infrastructure. So at this stage, you are one of the established developers and co-owner of the code base. Multiplies the effectiveness of others by facilitating cross-teamwork. So as a staff engineer, you are also going beyond the boundaries of your own team if you are based on a team in the first place and not on some kind of departmental or organizational level. There's still room to grow to the senior staff engineer, anticipates broad technical change and ensures, here we have Rent the Runway written out, is always ahead of the curve. Consistently delivers large systems involving one or more teams' contribution on time at a high level of quality. Plays a key role in developing multi-year technology strategy for complete and critical areas of the business that encompass multiple systems and teams. Primarily acts as a multiplier by building systems, authoring tools, or introducing policies or patterns that raise the level of productivity of the entire organization. Now we are at a level where you are active on the strategic level. And still, we are on the IC track. You don't have to lead people to do that. In many organizations, in order to be involved with strategy, in order to direct the course of a whole engineering organization, you would have to become a manager. You would become something like a departmental head, a VP of engineering, or even a CTO. And I think it's remarkable that Rent the Runway has people on the IC track participating in strategic deliberations and in basically influencing the course of the organization. And finally, we have the principal engineer or chief architect. And I would say we are blending into the areas where a VP of engineering or a CTO would also be active, setting technical direction, identifies technology strategic growth opportunities that enable Rent the Runway to grow as a business, communicates multi-year technical strategy, and leads the team in identifying further strategic areas for development. Basically, if you added people management in there, you more or less would have the role of a VP of engineering. So there you have it. It's a great document, and if you want to take a peek yourself, feel free to join my Discord, where one of our members has posted this, and that post actually sparked my discussion here today. The !Discord command will give you the URL to our server. That's that, and with that, I'm going to take a short break, and I'll be back in a few minutes. And we're back. Hello everyone. I'm going to start another Pomodoro. And we are going to switch gears to infrastructure coding. But still, if you have any questions on the topic that we've covered before the break, which is career ladders, advancement in software engineering and things like that, ask away, pop into chat, and we can still have a talk about it. However, I'm going to switch to one of my chef cookbooks, which we use to automate our hosting infrastructure. And I'm working on improving our use of Netdata, which is a metrics monitoring software. It's open source and it's great. You should really try it. Just yesterday I talked to a customer who's using Netdata to monitor their home Raspberry Pi. So they find out when it's overloaded, when its CPU gets too hot and things like that. These are all metrics that Netdata can not only collect but also show in great real-time graphs. And we've been using Netdata for a while now in our production environment with hundreds of Linux servers. And I'd like to get more of Netdata than we've done so far. And that's why I'm working on this cookbook. Most of what I've done so far is also reflected in the branch name. It's a refactoring. I already sent a merge request. However, I just noticed this exclamation mark here in my shell, which would mean that there are still changes that I haven't pushed to the merge request yet. And that is confusing me. So let's take a look at what's going on here. Okay, it's only the lock file for our cookbook dependencies, the Burks file. I don't remember the author of the tool that resolves cookbook dependencies. Jamie Windsor. Yeah, I do remember. Jamie Windsor built Burke Shelf, which manages cookbook dependencies, and Jamie was wise enough to not use bookshelf and book file as the terms of his tool, as the terminology. Instead, he went the meme route and said it's a Burke shelf and a Burke file. Oh my god. So what actually did change here? Ah, I see. Okay, so a different cookbook. Yeah, actually that's a completely different cookbook here. And we can actually get rid of this. It's not relevant in my current context. That's that. We should be fine. So I can actually go ahead and merge this change. Let's try and do another master merge, because there might have been changes. Yep. Now we should be able to push this. Okay. That'll trigger another CI run, but then we can automatically merge that once the pipeline has run. And while this is running, we can prepare our environment to deploy this cookbook. I am 90% confident that my changes will not affect our production environment in a negative way, because it should be mostly a refactoring with a few new attributes introduced that should retain how the cookbook works. So I'm quite confident, but in order to mitigate the remaining 10%, I'm going to first deploy this cookbook to our staging environment, where we have a few of our own servers that won't suffer too much if something goes wrong, and especially it will not impact any customer infrastructure. So I'll have to change my project here. And let's see. Here, let's also make things a little bit easier for myself. Okay, here we go. So if I take a look at the different chef environments we have, there are only a few pinned versions here for cookbook version 0.1, which is quite an old version, and these environments are mostly for legacy infrastructure. But especially for production 13 and testing 13, there are no pins. And testing 13 will not require any version constraints, because we want to deploy stuff in testing as soon as it gets deployed. But production 13, here I'd like to be a little more cautious and pin Netdata to what's currently active in this environment. So let's actually take a look at what is active on this. So I guess I can simply take one of my testing servers. And I'll have to use sudo, so excuse me for a moment while I'm grabbing my sudo password. Okay, here we go. And now I'd like to find out which version of Netdata we are running in testing at the moment. That's easy to grab from our Chef client log, and it's Netdata 041. So I'm going to pin Netdata to version 0.4 in our production environment for the time being. I guess I can. Oh, let's do it manually. Here we go. And we'll have to have a new row here. I guess we'll insert this here. And we'll pin this to 04, which means wait a second. 104. Oh, I guess. Actually, I don't remember the patch version. We could take a look at that in the repository. Because there should be a tag for our cookbook. And before the 1.0 version, interesting, there is no 0.4 tag. So 0.4 must be really, really old. Interesting. So, give me a minute. I should have opened Tmux for this anyway. That way I can actually switch back to here and find out in my change log. Huh. What's going on here? There is no 0.4 entry in the change log. Curious. Let's ask our chef server which versions we have available here. Knife, cookbook, show, Netdata, first deal. Oh, crap. What I was looking at was the Netdata cookbook, a dependency of our own Netdata cookbook. Our own cookbook is named Netdata Freestyle, and now I got confused completely. Let's log into my server again. It asks a new password, just a second. Since I'm working in production here, I need to be a little bit more cautious. Hey, well, Bites, how you doing? I'll get back to your question in a minute. It's right in my wheelhouse, because I've just recently switched operating systems. Let me see. What did I want to do? I should actually not grab Netdata add. That's where I confused myself. It's a Netdata-Freestyle add. And that's 104. So the second to last version, actually, which makes a lot more sense. Let me see. Yeah. And my recent newest version is 110. Okay, 104 then. And we'll pin that. I should have stayed in this session anyway. We can open a different session in Tmux anyway. So let's go back and make sure we have the right version. That's 104. And should we release patch levels of 1.0, these will also be applied, but it will not switch to my most recent 1.10 version. And let's make sure we have the latest version of our environments. Yep. So I can actually do a knife environment from file. Which will upload this environment definition to our chef server and make sure that in production 13, we will only run Netdata FreeStyle 1.0 and not switch to the 1.1 that I'd like to test in my testing environment first. So, Whalebytes asks, what do you recommend for web dev? Windows with Windows subsystem for Linux or full Linux? I think both are very viable solutions. For the last 15 years, I'd say, I was a full Apple devotee and worked both on Macs, MacBooks, iMacs, and also on iPads. And that worked quite well thanks to the underlying BSD Unix macOS is built upon. And of course, tools like Brew that make installation of system-level tools much, much easier. However, apart from wanting to do more, wanting to play more current games and therefore needing more beefy graphics hardware, I also switched to Windows because I felt more and more constrained by the security measures that Apple builds into Mac OS, and having to deal with all the issues when you do an operating system upgrade and then your whole homebrew setup doesn't work anymore, things like that, was getting to me, I'll be honest, and it basically reminded me of the days when I used Linux as my main workstation operating system, and every few weeks I had to tweak my graphics drivers, had to adapt mode lines in my XF86 config file and things like that. And back then I said, okay, I don't want to work on my tool, I want to work with my tool, and basically the computer is my tool, isn't it? And so I switched to Mac and was very happy for more than 10 years. Now Apple brought me into the same situation with macOS. So I bought a gaming laptop and installed Pop! OS, the System 76 Linux distribution, and both are working great. And so I'd answer your question with, in terms of web development, both are working fine. Let me just grab a drink. And getting the drink and get the drink where it's supposed to go. I'm sorry. The reason why I'm streaming from Windows is that Windows still supports more hardware, more devices too. So, for example, I'm using a Stream Deck to control my whole office here and my streaming environment as well. And while there is some kind of a Stream Deck support for Linux, it's very homegrown, and it certainly will not support as many plugins as I have available here on Windows. And let me tell you, my eyes really went wide when I saw how many more plugins are available on Windows than there are even available on macOS for the Stream Deck. And so even though I'm really having fun using Pop! OS with its enhanced GNOME window manager and things like that, I simply feel like Windows will be more convenient and actually less of a hassle in the long run, and that's why I mostly work from Windows. WSL2 is pretty amazing. I mean, in the same time I open the terminal application on macOS, I get a real live Ubuntu running in my terminal here, and that still blows my mind. And it mostly works great. Since Docker for desktop, Docker for Windows now also runs inside WSL, I mostly have a Linux-only environment here. And I'm keeping Windows and the WSL environment pretty separate. Very rarely do I need to access WSL files from Windows or vice versa. So I'm pretty happy with how it works. The only thing I ran into where I had difficulties is running VirtualBox, because VirtualBox needs to run on Windows for system level access reasons, and it seems like I can't get Vagrant to run on the native WSL file system, which is the fast file system, because it's contained within WSL. I would have to put my project files on the mounted Windows file system in order for VirtualBox to access them, and that would basically get me into the same situation that I ran into with Docker and macOS, where these mounted file systems, these virtual file systems, come with a substantial performance decrease. And so at the moment, I don't have any solution how to run Vagrant with VirtualBox, which limits my ability to test my cookbooks a little bit. But since I still can use Docker, I'm not completely lost here. C Films, welcome. Good to see you're doing great. Happy to see that. And thanks for following Whalebites. Welcome to Full Stack Live. Okay, so where are we? I've uploaded my constraint. Let's see. Yep, I added a constraint Netdata for ISTL to 104. That's already running in our production environment, so we'll keep it running that way. And let's take a look at our merge request. I would assume that tests have already run, and since I clicked on merge after finishing the pipeline, I can only assume the pipeline finished successfully. GitLab automatically merged my code, which means that we can switch back to our cookbook and actually switch to the master branch that we'll still have to rename eventually. And let's update. Okay. That's that. These are my latest Netdata changes. Let me switch into my Netdata cookbook here and run rake tag, which tags the cookbook or this particular commit with the current cookbook version, and it will automatically upload that to our chef server if everything works okay. Let's take a look at our CI pipeline. There should be a new job for deploying this version. So the release job is already running. Sometimes this release job fails with some obscure UTF-8 encoding error. I have no idea where this comes from, and I have never taken the time yet to actually debug that, because I can alternatively deploy this version from the command line as well. So I never bothered with debugging this. Let's see if the UTF-8 error occurs or not. Otherwise, it will automatically upload my version 1.10 to our Chef server. And all nodes in our infrastructure that aren't constrained by some kind of environment file will actually start running this version, which most importantly will be my testing 13 environment. And so I'll be able to see the cookbook work on our own servers. Actually, upload went fine. It did upload Netdata FrySteel 1.10, and so we'll be able to see that in action. C-Films asked about the stack I'm using for this project. This project is about infrastructure automation. I'm using the software Chef to code our infrastructure automation, to build our, as we say, infrastructure as code. Alrighty, so my session time has run out as well. This is perfect timing. I'll take a short break and then we'll take a look at what I've done to our systems. See you in a minute. Hello back. Let me check for this now. But I'm sorry for the inconveniences. Of course, you weren't supposed to run into auto moderation here. And if I can find the settings, I'll make sure to disable them. Security. Don't sell yourself short. Pretty sure your comments were actually interesting, so let's make sure you can reach us with them. Where's that effing moderation settings? Oh god, let me see. Do I have to? Yeah, I guess I'll have to do that here, right? Let's see. Here we go. I'm also doing this because I think I should, as the person streaming, know where to set these things. Let's see. But in my defense, the Twitch user interface could be a little bit better. Let's see. Let's jump randomly into here. You know what? Might also be because my window is a little bit small. Settings. Moderation. See, as soon as I fold out the menu. Locked terms and phrases. Here we go. Followers. Okay. That should do the trick. And let me see. I can also unmoderate your comments, shouldn't I? Actually, there's not even a mention of any comments that were blocked for you. That's curious. Well, feel free to repost your comments. They should go through now. In the meantime, we need to do a little bug fix. What I found here on my test server here is that I almost made my new cookbook version backwards compatible, and I left a little bug in there. And so let's go ahead and take a look at the cookbook. So, just to give you a little bit of context, I introduced a few more attributes that we can set on a node, basically on a Linux server, and those control different features of Netdata. Mostly we have flags for the stream feature and for the web interface feature. And I found that both should be disabled by default, because web should only be enabled if you really want to expose your metrics to the internet. By default, Netdata doesn't have any security constraints, so everyone who knows the host name or the IP address and the default Netdata port will basically be able to see your system metrics, and that's by intention. Netdata has a documentation page on this. You can agree or you can disagree on this policy, but it's as it is. And I thought stream enabled should also be false. Stream means especially if you run your Netdata on your server headless, so you don't give access to the web dashboard, you can also alternatively stream your metrics to a central host where you can then set up security constraints and things like that, and get the metrics from all of your Linux servers, because all of your Linux servers will stream their metrics there. However, in order to make stream enabled true by default, I would also have to set the target host by default, which I cannot know, of course, here in the cookbook, because that will depend on your infrastructure and might change from time to time. So if I can't set the stream target by default, it does not make any sense to enable streaming by default, because that would mean installing the cookbook as it is would set up streaming to a non-defined host and would break, and that doesn't make any sense. So I said, okay, stream enabled should be false by default. However, since I'm newly introducing these attributes, none of our servers has them defined yet. Up until we start defining them, rolling out this cookbook would mean on all of our hosts, streaming would get disabled and the web interface would be disabled. Disabled web interface would actually be okay, because we already have that disabled. However, we use the streaming approach. So I've actually noticed that actually happened what I wanted to prevent, namely streaming gets disabled on our hosts, which I anticipated and wanted to do a workaround in this way here, where I say set up streaming if streaming is enabled, which, just to reiterate, is not the case in our infrastructure, or the parent host attribute is not empty. And that's actually the case. Parent host is an attribute that has been existing for a while, and so I wanted to go this way to say, okay, stream enabled will not be the case by default, because we don't know this attribute yet in our infrastructure, but the parent host attribute is set. So this should actually make sure that the streaming gets set up, mostly using this Netdata stream resource that creates the necessary configuration file. And that's where the bug lies. This configuration file gets written, yes, it does, and that's because of the parent host exception up here. However, there's also this enabled attribute that we set inside the configuration file. And look here. We only take into account the stream enabled attribute, and that means currently on the hosts that are using this newest and latest version of the cookbook, the configuration file for streaming does get written, However, it will have the stream enabled attribute set to no, and this again disables streaming. Streaming gets configured as disabled, and that's the bug we need to fix. So let's go the proper way of creating an issue for our Netdata Feisty cookbook. Streaming gets disabled even if parent host is set. The exception for configuring metrics streaming if parent host is set works to the point that the configuration file is written, but streaming is then disabled within the file. I'll take full responsibility, so I'll assign this issue to me and label it as a bug. So that's issue number 659. We are on the master branch, so let's cut a new branch, 659 Netdata streaming. And I'd say it's time for a new test suite here. And in fact, I probably should have created this test suite in my previous change already. And we call that integration legacy. Come to think of it, I'm not sure, because legacy is something very ephemeral, I'd say. As soon as we've rolled out version 1.1 across all our servers, it's not going to be an issue anymore. So I would say, on one hand, I'd like to test this, because I find it really great practice to fix a bug by writing a test for this particular bug first, and then making the code changes that make the test not fail anymore. And here's my colleague, Division by Zero. Hi Marcus, I've discovered a bug in my latest version of Netdata, and now I'm debating if I should write a test case for that or not. Well, I'd say in doubt, when you're in doubt, write the test. Okay, so let's actually create a new test suite here. We call it Legacy, or we'll call it Parent Host. Just Parent, be short. Stream. Well, since it's about I'm so torn. Thing is, unfortunately, with chef cookbooks, it's really hard to create, or it's very involved to create test cases, because other than in normal software applications, you can't just easily create the scenario for what you're going to test. And at the moment I'm really struggling with creating a whole scenario where our test suite needs to spin up new machines and things like that to simply test this single bug. And this bug will not matter anymore once we've updated our infrastructure to use this cookbook properly. So I think, even though it doesn't fully feel right, I'll not write a test for this particular bug. What I'm going to do is fix it, though. And that's easy, because here on these two lines I already have the right conditional, and I simply need to reuse this conditional down here, where I define the enabled attribute. And of course I should have done that from the start. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to actually move this to a method here. Netdata stream enabled, question mark. And we'll take this exact condition here and add Netdata stream enabled. In this case, we'll write the configuration file. Actually, we should write this configuration file in any case, because if we want to disable it, should also do that. Okay. So what we actually should do is write this . Oh, okay. The thing is, if it's not enabled, we should not define these two attributes here. So I would say I'd rather duplicate this And that way we don't need the condition anyway. We can simply hardwire this to no. Oof, there's an end missing. And in this case, we can simply hardwire this to yes. And then we'll pass in the other oh crap, wrong line. Here. Here we'll hardwire this to yes. Pass in destination and API key. And if it's not enabled, we'll write the same configuration file, but just with enabled no. Okay, so that was another hidden bug. No, no one's made a parental advisory joke yet. Except you, I guess. Chef spec test. Yeah, I know you're a friend of chef spec tests. Would I be able to easily create a scenario using chef spec? Guess yes. I could define my attributes this way, and then chef spec would only work if there are matchers for this resource, though. I mean, this resource uses a template behind the scenes, so we could work around and check if a template gets written for the stream configuration file, and we also would have to re-engineer how these values get passed into the template, and then we could write a chef spec test around that, but it feels bad that we would need a lot of private knowledge behind this resource in order to test it. So yeah, I think it's unfortunate that that it takes such a lot of effort in terms of testing things. If Pulumi would be a better fit for unit testing, infrastructure as a service or infrastructure as code, I think. Suppose this is Ruby, so it wouldn't be any different. I've come across Pulumi, but I have no idea how it works. Just to give you a little bit more context on my thinking here. So in order to test this bug, I would have to define my own test suite that reflects our current infrastructure setup, where parent host is set, and with the new cookbook version, streaming enabled would be false. And then my tests would have to assert that the streaming configuration still gets written, and gets written with enabled yes. Because simply for the fact that the parent host is actually defined and not an empty string. And what I'm struggling with is that this test will only be necessary for a few more days, because then we'll explicitly set streaming enabled to yes in our infrastructure, because that tells people what's happening much better than simply defining a parent host and then implying that this means that streaming will be enabled. Having an explicit streaming enabled true tells the story much better, and we'll do that, and that will completely eliminate the need for this exception where we say if streaming is enabled is false, however parent host is set. That means that we imply that streaming should be enabled after all. And so writing a test suite for that, and also extending the runtime of our tests by another minute or two for setting up a virtual host and all these things feels bad. I think the cost outweighs the benefit, and so I guess that's why I ended up not writing a test after all. And yes, as Marcus says, there are unit testing capabilities. However, of course, if we are talking about infrastructure, actually testing the code without exercising it on a real machine is very limited, and that's what chefspec does. Chefspec basically runs these cookbooks, these recipes, and of course it runs them in a dry mode where there is no test infrastructure to apply the code. It simply runs the code as Chef does in its first phase, where Chef builds up a tree of resources that need to be checked and executed on the infrastructure. And that's where chefspec stops, because there is no machine to apply this rule set. And then you can basically examine what Chef now thinks about the infrastructure and would execute if there was any. So it's basically similar to RSpec, so it's similar to basic RSpec, where you run your code and then see what variables get set or what methods get called and things like that. It's much different though to feature tests, where you use something like Capybara or Selenium or something, where your code gets executed and then your tests look at the actual web page that gets rendered and tests the DOM and things like that, where you can really see, we did set the right variables, but due to this bug or another, actually this part of the page did not get rendered or did get rendered wrongly. And that's the same situation we are in here. We could either run very lightweight tests that don't tell us the whole story, or we can run these integration tests that use Test Kitchen to spin up a test machine inside a Docker container or inside a virtual box or inside a Vagrant VM. And then we can take a look at the actual machine and take a look at the configuration files that get written and at the services that get started and things like that. However, while these integration tests tell us much more of the whole story, they are also very expensive in terms of test duration and things like that. So in this case, it's not worth going either way, I'd say. Instead, I'm going to take another break and let Test Kitchen do its magic in the background, so you don't have to join me in staring at a test log. And I'll be back in a minute or so. Hello again. Let's go into another round. Here we go. Tests just finished successfully. So at least I didn't break any of the things we actually are testing. And I actually made the necessary changes for the whole test suite to succeed, I would say. Let's see. Version has been bumped. RoboCop is happy. Food Critic is happy. And now it's going to run another kitchen test that it just ran. So I'll cancel that. Which means that we can actually commit these changes. Fix stream configuration with legacy attributes. This change makes sure that streaming start if only current host is set. Streaming not only gets configured, but also enabled. And we can create this merge request. Assign it to me. And since we're not deploying this to production yet, I'll make approval optional. Now GitLab CI will run another test on its own, which only should take a few more minutes, and then we can merge this fix. Oh, see, I already have approval. That's brilliant. So I can actually say merge when pipeline succeeds. And then I can actually also tag this version, which will get it deployed to our chef server. And the new fixed version will automatically be applied to our testing infrastructure, because not only is this only a patch level change, we actually don't have any constraints in our testing environment, so any new cookbook version would be installed anyway. That's how we use our testing environment, and production is actually constrained to the previous minor version, so my latest changes will not be applied there without my active intervention. I still have a little bit of coffee left, yes. And thanks to my keep cup, it's still lukewarm. How long have you been streaming? Let's see. No more than 2 hours yet. Okay. And since I see OBS flashing red again, if there are any issues with the video or with my bandwidth in general, please let me know. I'm streaming at rather high levels at the moment with 1080p 60, and should my internet connection does not hold up, I'll happily reduce them a little bit. Yes, empty cup is always bad cup. It's always the game of good cup, bad cup. Yeah, Safari has its hang-ups, and even on the Mac I actually used Brave as my main browser. And now I'm using it across all platforms, and with the sync function in Brave I always have the same settings everywhere, the same extensions and everything, and that's another thing that Safari didn't give me. I even use Brave on the iPad and the iPhone as my main browsers. I've never heard of Vivaldi though. I can only assume it's another browser built on Chromium. What are the advantages of Vivaldi over vanilla Chrome? So let's take a look at our pipeline just for entertainment, just to see where we are. You're actually using Edge, okay. Though it feels dirty. Well, as someone who just switched from macOS to Windows, I've abandoned all morality. Anyway, so I don't feel dirty. Actually, if I'm honest, by now I rather feel stupid, because this feeling dirty for using Microsoft stuff, well, I have to admit, it's a thing that says that we are stuck in the past. Because Windows 10, with all its things, really works at least as well as macOS ever did for me. And on top of that, I have a more or less native Linux at my disposal where I can work like I've always been working. And software quality has greatly improved since the times of Windows 95 or Windows NT. It's highly configurable. Yeah, okay, granted, but what's the advantage of using it over plain Chrome or Brave in my case? I don't think I need my browser to be highly configurable as something by itself. I don't spend my time configuring things for fun. Doesn't VS Code work well with WSL2 yet? I would assume that it would. As I said, I'm using WSL very self-contained, so I never access it from the outside. Almost never access it from the outside. Sometimes I need to have access to a compiled binary, for example, for flashing a keyboard or something like that. But other than that, Windows and WSL are mostly separate things. Since I don't use VS Code and instead run NeoVim inside the terminal, I don't have any issues there as well. But I would expect VS Code to run nicely with Docker running inside WSL2. It should be able to do something like SSH into a container or something like that. Of course, yeah. If you have a corporate setup with all the antivirus and firewall stuff that's bloated as hell, you might not have a nice experience. But I can't but sing praises of Windows. I'm really still surprised myself that I didn't run into any significant issues at all. But there are minor issues, and you just reminded me of one. Git has no concept of the host SSH agent, and using Git outside WSL2 seems to be quite hard. I ran into this with Obsidian and its Git plugin, because I would have to authenticate against the repository to push changes in my notes files. And I couldn't get it to work without spending hours Googling and trying to set up things, and in the end I simply went back to relying on Dropbox to providing me with sync and versioning, and that works well, so I simply disabled the Git plugin in Obsidian. But that's the only thing I can think of at the moment where I ran into problems at all. Vivaldi has a unique tab management, including tab grouping, nice keyboard control by default. Oh, that's actually nice. You always get me with keyboard. And of course it lacks features you don't like. Yeah, we all don't. Like the Google integration or spyware. Okay, so as we can see, my CI job succeeded, so I can return to my merge request, which actually is number 600, so it's an anniversary number. And it automatically merged, so I can go right ahead and check out the master branch, pull my changes. I should have used the SSH agent before starting tmux here. Now I need to log in all the time. However, I could at least do the eval trick. Okay, that's that. These are my latest changes, and I can go right ahead and say rake tag. And since my last tag commit worked well in CI, I would assume that this deployment should work as well. Yeah, I don't like their cryptocurrency stuff as well. I've simply disabled the feature in the browser and I don't see it anymore. Come on. I can't complain about the performance of this CI run because it runs on our own GitLab runner. And quite a beefy one too, but sometimes it just takes its time. Still, upload went fine, so I should be able to switch to my test server here. And let's see when Chef ran automatically for the last time. That's 27, which was 5 minutes ago. It won't wait for 5 more minutes, so I'll run it manually. When I run a Chromium browser, I mostly have this momentum extension enabled, and that gives me a nice start page without any Bitcoin stuff or other things, so I'm quite happy about that. In any given moment, we have 2 options: to step forward into growth or back into safety. That's very inspirational. So here we go. And let's simply grab if enabled is true in our stream configuration now. Yes. Okay, so the bug is fixed. And that should make Netdata work in our current infrastructure and allows us now to disable the web interface and the streaming as we want. Which means I've now laid the groundwork to add a new feature to this cookbook, and that's going to be integration with Netdata Cloud, the central web-based product that Netdata offers. However, I think that'll lead me a little bit too far today, and I have a deadline set at 5 p.m, which is in less than half an hour. So we'll do something different. I'd say we'll call it a day in terms of coding for now. Merge request has been merged, new version has been deployed. That's good. Next step could be to deploy it in production. Should work. But we'll see. Let's close this. Yeah, I think that's good. We'll go into Q&A, I'd say. Maybe you have a few questions about what I've done so far in terms of chef cookbooks, or If you're interested in the topic we had before about software engineering career ladders, in any case, or if you have another topic that you'd like to touch on, if you have any questions you'd like to ask and discuss with me and the chat, write it down, send it to us, and we can have a talk about it. And there's a reminder by Division by Zero that I still owe Request a Beat. I'm so sorry that I forgot about that, and I'm still not prepared because I forgot about it. I'll make a note on this. Under next steps, prepare beat reward. And so I guess I'll pay my debt on Thursday. Yeah, I guess that's what brains do, don't they? It's amazing how they retain the most stupid stuff, but the things that you really need right now, that they are buried under all this useless crap. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have fun making a beat for you, since you requested that a long time ago, I think. But I'll have to do a few technical preparations for it, and I'll take a little bit of time in preparation for next stream, which I'm planning for Thursday. And since this worked quite well in terms of viewer interaction, I'm going to stick with the afternoon schedule. So I'll be back on Thursday at around 2 p.m. Irish time. Don't start stacking up requests, Marcus. Otherwise we'll have to have a beat making stream, a whole dedicated music stream, which I wouldn't mind anyway. I'm also thinking about doing a World of Warcraft stream from time to time, just to shake things up a little bit. So, let's open the floor. Is there anything that you'd like to ask? Is there anything that you'd like to discuss while we are still running for another 20 minutes or so? I have a question for you. Thinking of last week, was there anything that you'd count as a win, as a highlight? Anything that you'd like to share with us that you achieved in the last 7 or 8 days? If you can think of anything, feel free to share it. For me, it would certainly be doing 3 streams. I think I streamed on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I even thought about doing another live coding stream on Friday, but I didn't find the time. So that was nice. Execute.io was able to speed up a search mechanism from 20 seconds to 4 seconds, which is a 5 times improvement. Congratulations! Very nice. I did a pair debugging session with a customer yesterday. They had an issue with a database query that took about half a minute. and in the end failed with an error that the temporary file system ran full, which meant their query was creating a few gigabytes of temporary result sets. And so I offered them to do a pair debugging session, because queries like that will never work, regardless of the size of our temp space. Even if we had extended that query that takes half a minute on a RAM disk to, in the end, fail and not even deliver a result, is broken more than you can fix. And so I offered to do a debugging session, and we took a closer look at the execution plan for the query, and quickly realized that this was probably an auto-generated query based on a similar use case, but with a few things stripped off for simplicity, because it only wanted to create a count instead of a whole data set. And then we realized, okay, if you just want to create a count result, you don't have to run a join on a completely irrelevant table and group by 5 different columns, which you don't aggregate in any way. Doesn't make any sense to even force the database to do a temporary result set, joining tables, grouping columns which then don't get aggregated and only get counted. So we modified the query by hand without these completely unnecessary constraints, and it ran within a fraction of a second without any issues and without creating gigabytes of temporary data. So we might actually be able to submit a patch to the Drupal project where we modify this query in a more sophisticated way. Domas XD asks, and welcome to FullStack Live, by the way, Domas. Are tips for current Linux admin junior DevOps trying to transition? I guess any tips for current Linux admin trying to transition to DevOps/SRE? Well, that probably depends on your current expertise and level of. You say you are junior DevOps. Since you say Linux admin, I assume that you are coming more from the system side, just as I did. And in terms of DevOps and especially SRE, site reliability engineering, you'll definitely need software development skills. So if at the moment you are more used on using the terminal to set up Linux services and web servers and things like that, choose any of the popular programming languages and get proficient with it, because that will give you the necessary skills to get into SRE, which is very much about automating infrastructure, building code for that, and just as I did in this stream, where I used Ruby to automate our hosting infrastructure, you definitely need solid foundation in software development in order to get more into SRE, because the basic Linux administration skills will really only be part of your foundation there. You really need to be able to read and write code proficiently if you want to get into SRE. Creator asks, what would you be looking for in a future employee who has no work programming experience, and what would be the best way to get that across in a resume or other means? That's an interesting question, and it nicely follows up on what Domas XD asked. If you have no work programming experience, maybe you can specify what you mean with work programming experience. I think there's an opposite that you are implying there, where maybe you have hobby programming experience or something like that. I would be curious if you actually mean I'm not a professional programmer, but I can code and I do so in my spare time. If that's what you mean, just let me know. And if it's not what you mean, maybe you can elaborate on what you mean. Thomas writes, I'm currently, let's say, a junior DevOps doing Ansible and Chef thingies. Okay. Well, then you are in a good position to grow into SRE simply by doing more of that. Chef is, I think, more is a different approach to infrastructure as code than Ansible. Ansible is more declarative and Chef is more imperative. If you're doing both things, great, because that's best of both worlds. And I'm very curious about Ansible as well. I've studied it quite a bit, but I've never used it in production. And both are great places from where to start into SRE. Richard next writes, well, professionally I came from a different career path, as do many people. There are so many biologists and sociologists and all kinds of ists that switch to coding simply because it's much easier to get a job there. Currently learning programming, specifically Ruby and network fundamentals. Different non-tech career path. Yeah, that's what I assumed. So, okay. With that background and currently learning programming Ruby and network fundamentals. Okay, let me just close this blinking Pomodoro timer here. That's an interesting scenario, but nothing that I would be worried about, because let's go back to our career path. Let me see if I can... Oh, I still have the link in my notes here. So let's go back to here. Or maybe even switch here. So you will definitely be on the lower levels of the career ladder. Let's see what they're asking for. In terms of technical skill, so just to give you a little bit of context, if you weren't here at the start of the stream, this is the career ladder definition from Rent the Runway, a web-based clothing rental shop who have great reputation in terms of engineering organization. And one of our Discord members posted the link to this software development / leadership ladder, which is, in my opinion, very, very good. And so let's take a look at what they expect from an entry-level engineer. Broad knowledge of core computer science concepts, and that would definitely fit programming language knowledge and network fundamentals, which are quite different things. So if you can get it across that you are getting better at both mastering a programming language as well as a concept like networking, network protocols, the ISO OSI stack, things like that, that is definitely part of broad knowledge of core CS concepts. It should be more than simply these two things, but I assume you use them only as examples anyway. And then they say, focus on growing as an engineer, learning existing tools, resources, and processes. So that means you don't have to come with this knowledge. You need to be focusing on acquiring this knowledge as your job. So you're getting paid for acquiring this knowledge, and that's a good place to be in. In terms of getting stuff done, they don't expect much either, because they say develops their productivity skills by learning source control, editors, the build system, and other tools, as well as testing best practices. So more of a conceptual understanding of how to do testing, how to use a continuous integration system and things like that. And you should be capable of taking well-defined subtasks and completing these tasks. And if you've been successful in any other kind of job before, I'm pretty sure that will apply to your engineering job as well. So I think you're good there. In terms of impact, there's almost zero expectations on this level. Developing knowledge of a single component of our architecture, so you'll be able to actually focus on a specific part of the web application in this case, and that will probably come automatically depending on the team that you are going to join, and then you'll be able to focus learning about a single component and contributing to this single component. And in terms of communication and leadership, that's again, these are skills that go beyond software engineering anyway. You should be effective in communicating status to the team. So don't get mired in something for weeks and then return with empty hands. Exhibits Rent the Runway's core values, focuses on understanding and living these values. That's a completely soft skill and goes far beyond software engineering. And then accepts feedback graciously and learns from everything they do. Basically is able to be managed. Because to be honest, that's definitely necessary on this level. Because how are you supposed to know your way on a map that is as huge as a modern web application, for example, and an organization that builds and uses it for its business? On this entry level, you're not supposed to know where things are going and where you should march, basically. That's the job of your manager and maybe of senior members of your team. So it's more about input in this regard than about output. And from there, you can basically grow into the more senior levels here, Engineer 2 and eventually Senior Engineer. But as you can see, the entry level is quite flexible in terms of the skills and the experience that you come with. And so the only challenge is finding an organization like Rent the Runway that have open positions for junior level engineers and have as sensible expectations as this particular example has. What do you think? Which I admit is not too easy, because there are many organizations that have much higher expectations on juniors, which is laughable, I'd say, because you should have appropriate expectations on people that are on an entry level, so you can have higher expectations on individual contributors on higher levels. This career ladder here is a very well thought out example, and I'll definitely take the time to steal a few things for our career ladder as well. Any other wins or things that you'd like to share? Is there anything that you've achieved over the last 8 days that you'd like to share, that you are proud of, that made your day, or that made a significant impact? Division by Zero took a good nap this afternoon, and I'm not sure how serious you are, but that's actually something very important as well. I'll really a well-deserved nap. You deserve more than that single nap, though. I'm well aware. It was probably the longest running project in our history, yeah. It's still not quite finished, but the biggest part of it is finished, yeah. And I'm very, very happy about it. But seriously, taking a break is so important, especially during this pandemic time. And actually being attentive with your energy levels and things like that, and taking pity on your poor self is an important thing. And many people aren't quite used to that, and they feel bad about taking a longer break than simply getting a coffee, or actually taking the time to take a nap or a walk outside, simply to mix things up. People are still used to the office life, where if you go outside for more than 5 minutes, people start looking for you. And in times where you work from home and have the perfect opportunity to take a break for a walk or for a nap or talking with people or anything else, that's actually something that I would count as an achievement, especially if it's something that you're not used to do, something that you don't do on a regular basis. So my recommendation would actually be take frequent naps if that's necessary, especially if you have small children, as Division by Zero and I, for a certain extent, have, especially in your case. Itokiri Batusai, hey, how you doing? I don't mind sharing the link. You could simply join our Discord server, where the link has been posted by a member, in the which triggered me picking it up for the stream in the first place. But I'll post it to chat as well. And if you'd like to watch the VOD of today's stream, I'm discussing the first few levels in detail at the beginning of the stream. Okay, folks, it's 5 o'clock here. Time to wrap things up. I'm quite happy with my achievements for today. It's been a lot of fun. I'm happy to have successfully tried the afternoon schedule, and I'll do the same for Thursday. So I'll be back on Thursday at 2 p.m. around that time, 2 p.m.-ish, Irish time or UK time as well. And I think that's it for today. Anything else? Well, I'll need to prepare my beat reward for Division by Zero, which I'm going to take a little bit time for. And other than that, we'll continue building out the Netdata Chef Cookbook on Thursday. So if you'd like to join me there, I'll be happy to have you with me. Until then, take care.